everyone, this is JG, the author of Blizzard, and welcome to the first episode of the Blizzard Audiobook. I started this audiobook series because I've received a lot of requests to do it, and I think it'll be helpful for the promotion of the series. If you'd like to follow along, there's a PDF file of the book in the link in the description. All that being said, let's get started. Blizzard, First Edition. Prologue, Shadow's Discovery. I sing of the legendary trio. The trio long since determined by fate to destroy an ancient evil. How does one praise the panda? How can one comprehend the sorrow of the cat? How must one understand the plight of the fox? How can one tell a story of this magnitude and splendor? What if when the teacher was racing through the forest, racing to unlock destiny? Yes, the story of the trio begins with another, who some consider to be the ultimate life form. Shadow skated through the forest. After having seen purple beams shoot out of the ground for 3 days straight, there was nothing he could have done but check one out. He had to make sure the world was safe and fulfill his promise. The terrain of this forest was very rough, rocky, and filled with pine trees. Strangely, not an animal was in sight. That beam probably scared off all the animals, Shadow thought. The forest was surrounded by a mountain range known as the Great Mountains, in the middle of which the purple beam shot out. Of course, no rough terrain could stop the legendary Shadow the Hedgehog, who has been through much more deadly areas and terrible events. The area suddenly seemed to get steeper and rockier. Shadow effortlessly dodged trees and skated around rocks with his air shoes as he progressed up the mountain. Then, Shadow reached an opening. It was similar to a cave, except that there was no endless labyrinth of tunnels, only an arch like a doorway that led to the other side. This is strange. Almost like this was carved in here, Shadow thought. He walked through the opening, and what he saw shocked him. He saw mountains encircling a massive abandoned kingdom, seeming to protect it somehow. Like walls around a castle, these mountains seemed to be protecting this kingdom from any intruders, with the forest surrounding it as a moat, relying on nature as its only defense. Shadow stared at the towering buildings covered in vines and surrounded by trees, marveling that he had never been here or heard of this place before. Then he listened to the eerie silence of the place and remembered his mission. That beam shot up from the middle of this place, Shadow thought. I wonder if these two things are connected. Shadow sped down the mountainside, descending into the kingdom. The terrain was mostly the same as the first side, with no animals in sight, but sometimes he would see an abandoned wall or piece of building overgrown with vines, not being used for thousands of years. As Shadow descended, he saw something he did not expect. The remains of an orange robot. Shadow stopped skating, walked towards it, and saw the logo. It was the face of a red-mustached man with glasses. Shadow knew it all too well. Eggman, he said out loud. So the doctor has been here too. What's he up to now? Having been enraged by this discovery, he started to skate with his air shoes again, with a newfound vigor towards the kingdom. As a skater with years of practice would skate through a sidewalk effortlessly, skating the same way he has done for his whole life to arrive at his destination, or to perform some trick. Just so, Shadow navigated this extreme terrain, dodging trees, rocks, and ruins, to find out what this mysterious kingdom was. Finally, Shadow arrived at the gates of the city. They're ruined, just like the rest of the remains he saw earlier, their golden doors cast down to the ground. He entered the gates and saw a bustling city of the ancient world brought down to ruins. Buildings were everywhere, but all of them were at least half destroyed, not like just time ruined them, but as if a great siege had occurred in those days. Vines were growing in all the buildings, and occasionally Shadow spotted bird nests and spider webs on some of them. Even they seemed currently abandoned. A stream of water coming from a waterfall off the side of one of the mountains flowed through the city with a bridge going over it. Shadow crossed the bridge, keeping his cool, but he was still amazed that this place remained mostly hidden for so long. Shortly after Shadow crossed the bridge, he caught sight of 3 humans. They looked like mountain climbers, standing there in the middle of the city like statues. Shadow walked over to them, expecting them to say something, but they kept their silence. "Excuse me?" Shadow asked sternly, trying to get their attention. They continued to say nothing. "Weird," Shadow said as he walked past them. He saw their eyes were glowing purple, and their skin and clothes were gray. Then he looked around at the nearby terrain. It looked a lot like a crater. Maybe this is where the beam shot out, Shadow thought. Did it do that to them? Suddenly, the humans let out a loud scream, similar to that of a crow, only louder and with more horror. Shadow nearly jumped from the loudness and soullessness of the sound. He turned to look at them and started to run towards them, ready to fight. The first human was preparing to slam Shadow with his fist. Shadow jumped over him and used his teleportation ability to kick him in the face with his air shoes, knocking him to the ground. Then, Shadow used the momentum for the first attack to dash towards the second human. He jumped, teleported again, and punched the human's chest 3 times, sending him flying back into a wall. Finally, Shadow caught sight of the third one. He boosted towards him, and with an uppercut, knocked him to the ground with the others. Something is definitely wrong with those humans, Shadow said. No one is usually fool enough to challenge me. He then turned away from the humans and continued his walk towards the middle of the city to see if he can find out more about what happened to those people. He was walking until he turned to his left, and he saw a strange sight. An animal, sentient and standing like him in front of a cave. She looked like a white fox, but she had pinkish-red markings on its face, and her eyes were glowing the same color. She was wearing a beautiful, flowy, dark red dress, and she had 9 tails. Shadow could tell that by her very presence that she was a higher being than he was. He had never met someone like her before. She pointed at the cave. "What?" Shadow asked. "You want me to go in there?" She nodded. Shadow ran over to the cave, but as soon as he got there, the mysterious being disappeared. Where did she go? Shadow thought as he turned left to right in confusion. After a few moments, he sighed. Whatever. She wanted me to enter this cave, so suppose it's where I'll get my answers. Shadow entered the cave, and he saw a bunch of murals. But these murals were unlike any Shadow had ever seen before. They were drawn with the size of markings made by our earliest fathers in their depictions of art, but with a skill and beauty that exceeded the grandness of church cathedrals. The cave was like a small room that had walls on four sides, as if some of it was carved in there, but it still maintained its rocky shape. On the sides to the left and right behind Shadow, the murals depicted hundreds, no, thousands of humans and animals, corrupted like the one Shadow saw earlier. Above them, the ancients depicted the purple beams that Shadow saw shooting from out of the ground for 3 days prior. That's what I thought. The purple beams and strange conditions of these humans were correlated, Shadow realized. The beams on the wall were all focused into the central picture in front of Shadow. The picture still had the corrupted beings in it, but in the center was a great dragon bursting out of the ground, with the purple beams coming out of his mouth. Above the dragon, there was a figure descending from the sky, wrapped in the sun. But the print faded out, so Shadow was unable to make out exactly who this figure was. To the left of this figure, there was a strange red stone. This stone was pushed down into the wall, like a real version of this stone could be placed there. To the right of this figure was a key. Like the stone, the outline of the key was pushed into the wall. But it was the center of the picture that caught Shadow's attention. In between the figure clothed with the sun and the dragon, there stood 3 figures. One was bigger and the other was smaller, but the print on these faded out as well. But in the middle of them, there was an Arctic fox. His fur was white and blue, along with blazing blue eyes. He had black, gray, and yellow shoes with ice skates attached to the bottom of them, along while holding a dagger made of ice. Shadow recognized this figure. "Carol!" he shouted before hurrying out of the cave and back into the mountainous forest.